and Made of Silk and Steel, Chapter 13. Peter doesn't really take the time to think about it. He doesn't really have the time to think about it. His mother is some kind of superwoman or something. Something that was strong enough to just make Ed go where she wanted, and his father is Daredevil. But he was scared and he was in more physical pain than he'd ever been in his life. And now he had more questions than he could possibly articulate. So Peter frantically kicked at the grate, and Dad gently pulled Mom and that strange blonde woman out of the way as it crashed to the floor, since the room was spinning around him and he could barely feel his legs. Peter could only throw himself back down into the warehouse and hope that Mom and Dad would catch him before he brained himself on one of the railings. It was Mom. "Peter!" she gasped, brushing her hand from the back of his head down in the middle of his spine. "Peter, you're covered in blood." "Mommy!" he whimpered, clinging hard to her leather-clad shoulders. He ceased to care about anything except that his parents were here, and it may have just been an illusion, though maybe not as much of an illusion as he used to think. But he already felt much safer. And over his head, his parents were having a very strange conversation. "Murdoch, is any of this actually his?" "It's all his," Dad said, even more grimly than his earlier "he's here." He stroked Peter's hair. "Jessica, I need you to check his eyes." "Peter?" Mom said seriously. "Come on, baby, look at me real quick. Open your eyes for just a second." Peter managed to pry his eyelids open at his mother's request before he squeezed them closed again. "Oh, honey," Mom whispered, looking and sounding worried. "It's okay, Peter. Dad and I will fix this." "They are really bloodshot, Matt," the blonde woman said, also sounding very concerned. "Both eyes. I'm not sure what he's been doing or how, but it's bursting the smaller blood vessels in his face," Dad said, and Peter opened his eyes again out of sheer confusion, because how could his father possibly even know that? Dad's head was still tilted in a way that meant he was putting most of his focus onto a particular thing. "Head hurts," Peter whined, burying his face in Mom's shoulder. Dad continued stroking his hair in a way that during bedtime became a hypnotic lullaby in its own. "I know, buddy," Dad whispered sadly, leaning over to press a kiss to his hair. "I know it does." "It looks like he needs a hospital," the other woman said. "Where we can tell them what when we get there?" Mom asked angrily. "He's covered in enough blood to look like he was at a murder scene, and still bleeding as we speak. He's half-dressed and hasn't had a bath or a decent meal in days, Trish. How should we explain that when the hospital staff wants to lock me and Murdoch up for child abuse?" "The kidnapping was all over the news," Trish protested. "Yup, and I've got a criminal record," Mom snarled, "so that's gonna look real good if the hospital calls child services." "Claire," Matt said firmly. "Right, buddy? You want to go see Aunt Claire and let her get you all fixed up?" Though his heart rate hadn't changed, Matt wondered if Peter was just so exhausted that he'd passed out again. "Peter?" Unlike Matt, Jess could see the sudden glazed, vacant stare her son's face had become set in, and her own heart leapt uneasily at the sight, which Murdoch probably didn't find reassuring either. "Peter?" she croaked, jostling him just a little for a reaction, any kind of reaction. "Spider monkey?" And then he went limp, head falling forward, limbs suddenly slacking in her arms, just before his arms and legs started twitching uncontrollably. What's happening?" Murdoch said, alarmed. "He's been bursting the blood vessels in his face," she snapped, helplessly holding onto Peter as his fists clenched and unclenched and his legs kicked and jerked against her torso. "Do you think that might include the ones in his brain?" For a moment, Jess considered putting her fingers in his mouth so that Peter wouldn't accidentally bite off his tongue. But she remembered hearing somewhere that you shouldn't do that, and she didn't really want to find out exactly how strong her son was with her own fingers between his teeth. "He's having a seizure?" Well, at least her baby daddy wasn't an idiot. "Hey," Trish suddenly shouted, "where are you going?" Murdoch's eyes widened, head jerking toward the retreating figure of the metal-armed man. "Let him go." "But..." We have bigger problems than him, Trish. Peter's parents have arrived. Asset Edward has successfully completed his mission in delivering Peter back to Murdoch and Jones. Ed doesn't know why this makes his face do a thing again. Sort of the opposite of the thing it does when he hears New Jersey, but his face seems to operate without his mind's permission. His body feels lighter somehow, despite his numerous bruises and the sprain in his right arm from Peter's maw. At first, he attributed that to the successful completion of his mission, but Ed's pretty sure that's never made him feel happy. Although the suspicious way Walker was staring at him, how do I know her name? And her squirrely pacing around was making him a bit uneasy. Ed felt very satisfied. Yes, he was satisfied that he managed to return Peter to his parents' care. Edward did not know the word apprehensive at the time, so he elected to ignore that other feeling, until Peter was suddenly not awake anymore, and then Murdoch was looking very worried. Walker and Jones began frantically hissing at each other. Peter Parker is experiencing a Category 6 medical emergency, nasal hemorrhaging and convulsions, cause unknown. Overuse of enhancement abilities is likely a contributing factor. New mission, locate medical assistance for Peter Parker. 3 aircraft vehicles, only 2 waves of attackers. Third? Secondary priority, locate and dispatch the 3rd set of hostiles. Pause, located, adjust. Classification. Group appears non-hostile. Visual survey identifies 5 subjects, all known as the Avengers. Bucky? Pause. Hydra affiliation not indicated. Target selected. Lock on. The 5 of them were not completely prepared for the Winter Soldier. They all knew in some way or another that they were going to have to approach Barnes at some point because it was obvious that Steve would not be able to help himself. What they hadn't expected was for Barnes to come to them. The soldier froze at the sight of them, pale eyes narrowing with a calculating air on their group. And elated, Steve breathed Bucky, hoping against all hope that some part of him recognized him, or at the very least recalled himself. Instead of turning his head towards Steve, Bucky's gaze remained fixed on the middle of their group just before he marched straight toward them, reached forward with that shining metal arm and clamped an unmovable grip around Bruce's wrist. Since Barnes was just one man, even if he was a powerful one, Bruce looked remarkably unruffled with his kidnapping. "Are you seriously gonna just let him drag you off?" Tony demanded, although he was cackling through most of the question, so clearly he was not that concerned. Bruce shrugged, letting himself be hauled full steam ahead. What exactly could he realistically do to me? "He's got a point there," Clint muttered, nudging their glum-looking captain. "He obviously wants you for something," Natasha observed. Eyeing the soldier's stone-faced determination, Steve said, "He doesn't seem bothered by us following him. I'd assume he either doesn't view us as a threat or us following him is the point," Natasha finished. The something that Bruce was desired for became quite clear when Barnes led them directly to Peter and his parents. The child was unconscious in his mother's arms and covered in blood from his nose to his knees. Murdoch was maskless, tense but unsurprised to see them approaching. Jones, on the other hand, clutched the boy closer to herself and hissed at him, "Why the hell did he bring them, genius?" Murdoch's face was soft and guileless, and sad now that he wasn't practically mindless with rage. "Jess," he breathed, spine tightening up straight. "He brought a doctor. He knew Peter was in trouble, and he brought him a doctor." Bruce met her eyes without flinching. Even as Jones looked at him with undisguised distrust, her alto voice came out venomous and dripping sharpened steel nails. That is absolutely not touching our kid, Murdoch. Banner is only a little stronger than you are, he coaxed. Jesus, saw Tony. The fact that he'd gone from spitting blood to sounding so calm and reasonable was freaking terrifying. At least Jones was this much of a bitch pretty much all the time. Yes, Jones agreed, lips still curled and still clutching Peter to her chest protectively. And I'm having second thoughts about holding him right now, too. I'm no stronger than any other man at the moment, Bruce informed her calmly. His teammates have thought Jones' attitude was offensive to him, but on the contrary, he actually found it strangely refreshing. People who knew that he was the home of the Hulk tended to treat Bruce with a cautious over-politeness, even as he could see the strain of contained fear at the edges of their eyes. Jessica's sniping contained only an almost petulant disgust that may not have been kind, but at least it was honest. It isn't how strong you are, Jones informed him bluntly. I can control what I do. For the most part, I can too. If it makes you feel better, Natasha told her in a languid drawl of her most skillful persuasion, I've never seen the big guy deliberately hurt any civilian. It doesn't, Murdoch and Jones informed her simultaneously in eerily similar tones, brisk and bitten off, which was just incredibly creepy if any of the Avengers were being honest. Then Murdoch turned his head towards Jones. After he had the seizure, he told her, his heartbeat started. No, you don't, Jones said fiercely. You don't tell me we're about to lose him. Not when we've just got him back. He's fading, Jess, he said very quietly, like it killed him to say it. And I can't tell how fast. But I don't know if he can make it all the way to Claire on time. I'm not actually a medical doctor, and I'm certainly not a pediatrician, but I've got a lot of practice in field medicine, Bruce told him bluntly, and Tony's jet has a full medical unit on it, better than any hospital you'll find in the city. Fine, Jones said, though her voice was low and mistrustful, but I'm carrying him in. Whatever floats your boat, Tony said quickly, already knowing the hair trigger this woman's temper rested on. We're never going to say no to someone volunteering to do the work for us. Jones continued to speak as they walk away, or at least they think that she does, because her mouth makes small distinctive movements, but she doesn't raise her voice to any volume able to be heard. Murdoch, apparently being clever enough to already have figured out that they are aware of his power and identity, doesn't answer her surreptitiously. As he follows her, Murdoch isn't even bothering to pretend to be an ordinary blind man, easily sidestepping fallen bodies and rubble without any indication he had trouble navigating. No, I don't think so, he says to her at the normal volume Jones can hear. Why, maybe the hand? But they were never this subtle, Jess. Yeah, I guess so, Jones replied aloud. Who is the hand? Walker pressed her. Secret order, Murdoch began. Dumbass ninjas, Jones said bluntly. Kung fu, the whole 9 yards. Really stupid long story. Ex-girlfriend, magic dragon bones, evil lady in a snazzy suit. Murdoch dies, he gets better at the end. Yeah, that's pretty much true, he allowed. Except that Jess left out the part where she didn't bother to mention we had met once before. In the biblical sense, even, she countered dryly. Jessica, Walker gasped, appalled. You kept Peter a secret from his own father? We've already had this conversation, Trish, Murdoch said, with a smile so polite it nearly circled back around to dangerous. I promise I don't need my honor defended. The by you part went unsaid, but apparently Jones knew him well enough that she still snorted at the implication. Tony was watching them as Bruce led them into the med bay of the jet. Murdoch was very alert, even as he stuck close by Jones and his son's side, and although Steve had tried to tentatively speak to Bucky, the man was never far away from that little boy. Like a good soldier, he kept Peter within his sight at all times, guarding him, watching Bruce very closely as he began his evaluation. It was clear, despite retrieving the doctor for his care, something in the Winter Soldier remained distrustful of him. Natasha, on the other hand, was trying to see if they could figure out who had sent the soldier in the first place, but was interrupted by the doctor himself. Ask him when Peter last ate or drank anything. He says a cereal bar from the gas station a few hours ago, a few sips of water as well, and before that, the soldier answers that clearly enough with a reluctant shake of his head. Jones, apparently trusting that Murdoch would keep monitoring their son if she took her attention away, glanced up at the Winter Soldier with narrowed eyes. Asked him why he wouldn't give Peter back to them when they wanted him to. Murdoch agreed. We know whoever sent those teams also sent him. But instead of handing Peter off the way he was supposed to, he kept running with him instead. He kept running with him. Why? This isn't who he is, Steve told her somberly. Bucky is my friend. They made him do this. Natasha asked and then listened patiently to the answer. Although her expression became more and more carefully neutral, the longer that she heard him speak. Clint, the only other person who had any fluency in Russian, murmured, Jesus freaking Christ, partway through his explanation. Steve glanced from Clint to Bucky. What did he say? Gently, Natasha said, protecting Peter is his mission. He says he seemed a bit confused about who gave him that assignment, but I think he means to say that he made it his mission. He says, she trails off, looking genuinely sad for the blink of an eye. He says that he told Peter he would bring him back to Jessica and in exchange, Peter promised that he would help the soldier find his mother as well. Buck, Steve said, a bit helplessly. Winnie is having gotten herself together a bit more, Natasha added. He says that he's worried because he thinks that she was sick. The last time he remembers seeing her, she was confined to a bed. Stricken, Steve breathed. Ask him what she looked like. And Natasha gave the soldier's answer. She wore a dark dress. He can't recall her face very well. She used to have dark hair, and it was blonde the last time he saw her. But he knows that her smile is beautiful, and she has very blue eyes. Oh, Bucky, Steve moaned sorrowfully, fingers pressed to his eyes. He looked much closer to his chronological age than he usually did, rubbing his eyelids frantically for a few moments. Winnie was alive well into the 70s, and she was as far from blonde as any person could get. He's blended his memories of Winifred Barnes with his memories of my mother. Peter had another seizure, and Murdoch suddenly said, Are the rest of you prepared for a fight? Natasha smiled grimly. We are always prepared for a fight. That's good news, Murdoch assured, because in a few minutes, we're gonna get one. We can't take off until Bruce clears the kid to move, Tony said, with a glance at Bruce that does nothing to hide his anxiety. Behind him, Bruce removed a pressure cuff from Peter's tiny forearm and called, I need 5 more minutes, Tony, just to gather his basic vitals. I don't get it, Stark, Clint complained to Tony. You said Murdoch and Jones made these people too nervous to go after the kid whenever they got anywhere in his area. Why are they so determined now when they got to know they've lost him? Natasha was staring at the collective group of Barnes, Murdoch, and Jones ringing Peter's bedside, the ferocious specters of adult nightmares, which had become a little boy's fiercest guardians of daylight terrors. Seeing his parents there tamed only through their devotion to him, Natasha had a revelation. Stark, she said, as it, along with a dawning sense of horror, came to her. We were wrong. Our theory was wrong. Which one this time? We assumed that they made a mistake when the instruction manual on the Winter Soldier said that Sergeant Barnes should be kept away from small children. But that wasn't a mistake. That was a test, Stark. Sending Barnes was a test, and I suspect that Peters passed it far beyond their wildest dreams. What the hell is she talking about? Jones demanded. They monitor people with superpowers. Barnes didn't get this way because he loves communism and flies the flag for the Soviet state. He ended up as this very statuesque zombie because they brainwashed him into obedience with torture, electric lobotomies, and a truly jaw-dropping amount of drugs. Tony explained, only half of his attention on the here and now. We assumed that they wanted Peter to become their next generation of super zombie, especially since he's young enough to indoctrinate more reliably into obeying, and what he can do is way beyond the good sergeant here. Murdoch makes a small but extremely terrifying noise, and Jones narrows her eyes on him. Fury should really give this lady a call. She could do some fantastic work for him in his interrogation units. And you don't think that's why they want him anymore? Enlighten us, Natasha. Peter isn't supposed to be the next Winter Soldier, she said, unable to quite conceal her distaste. This isn't about him, or not only about him, it's about all three of you. Wait, hold it, Clint says, before the other three can ask their questions. You said whatever agency was watching them is scared shitless of these two. They weren't recommended for capture specifically because they think both of them are a shitty investment on return. Jones would freaking destroy her handler, and Murdoch would rather kill himself than do the kind of things they'd be demanding. And what if the handler demanding it is their own son? Natasha said coolly, with a glance at Jessica, who was looking very chalky as Trish gripped her arm hard. She gestured at poor Bucky Barnes, sharper than he was riding through Missouri with Frank Castle, but still not a fully actualized human being. Can you tell me honestly that if you were reduced to a state like the unfortunate Sergeant Barnes here and your son, a person you instinctively love and trust and try to protect, was there giving you instructions, you wouldn't do everything he asked you to? They don't just want Peter because of his powers, although after checking those files, he might be the most powerful individual in their database. But they really want him because having custody of Peter means possessing the necessary means to control Murdoch and Jones. Murdoch's head twitched toward Tony. Stark's heartbeat skyrocketing a moment before he spoke. Oh no. Okay, team, this has become an alien invasion level problem. Whatever we do, whoever these people are absolutely can't get a hold on Murdoch and Jones. That's a little dramatic, Jones said dryly. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely would murder whatever asshole tries to mind control me. That's 100% true. But Murdoch and I aren't like, Murdoch finished for her, a bit apologetic, or locally known, annoy the precinct, beat cops, and sometimes take down some well-known criminals or supernatural bad guys. But alien invasions are way beyond either of us. We aren't a world-ending event. Speak for yourself. One of you by yourselves isn't world-ending, Tony said, unusually serious. I'm more worried about what happens when they want you to split the atom for them to again. You've already done it once, and look what you got from it. Fatal Attraction is right. Pete is adorable and also practically already at Avengers level strength as a 7-year-old. You're saying, Jessica said slowly. Matt spoke past the tightness in his chest. We're the mutant Adam and Eve. Tony nodded, eyes dark and mouth straight. The two of you are what, 30, 35 at most? They could get another 10 or 12, just like him. More if they manipulate things in their favor, Natasha said bluntly, which seems just like them. Murdoch let out a slow breath. We already guessed that they wanted Peter for his powers because he was born with them instead of getting them by accident like he did. Jones shook her head. Think about it, Matt. To use him for that, they have to wait another decade or so before he's any use to them for replication. Whereas if they have all three of you, Steve concluded grimly, they have an incredibly powerful 7-year-old young enough to be molded into what they want, and a pair of healthy adults who will obey him and also make more powerful children they can indoctrinate from birth rather than hanging around waiting. Jones glanced over at Murdoch, something like a smile playing at her mouth, if it held any amusement in it. Feel like making that Antichrist yet, Matt? Can't say that I've grown into the idea, Jess, no. Good, she said, with a dangerous gleam in her eye. Neither have I. End of chapter.